Welcome to section 4. In this section, we are going to be looking at branching in Git. Branches are very vital in the workflow of DevOps engineers, and they provide what we call a structured approach to the software development lifecycle. They also play an important part in continuous integration, and at the same time, they are also involved in the continuous delivery. Continuous integration is that process in which developers come up with a new code for the new feature in the software, and that code is automatically built and of course tested before it can be merged to the quality code base, which can be somewhere in GitHub or GitLab. If the process of building and testing the code is successful, we then go to the continuous delivery. And this continuous delivery can involve delivering the code that has been built and tested and was successful into other environments such as pre-production. Branches are very important because they help us with the isolation of changes. It's very important to understand that DevOps engineers are always going to be working on multiple tasks. And you can do these tasks simultaneously. Sometimes you are creating infrastructure as code. Sometimes you are working with configuration management tools such as Ansible. And sometimes you're working with deployment scripts. All these are necessary tasks in the process of creating an environment that is effective and also to support the automation and increase the productivity for both the operation team and the development team. Branches do allow for the isolation of changes, and this ensures that the modification to the infrastructure or to the configuration management is actually done independently and is done to the right version. So very important in isolating the changes. The next important thing about branching in Git is its ability to help us, of course, to do what we call parallel development. As we saw, DevOps are always involved in managing and automating various aspects in different kinds of environments. So branches are going to help us, of course, to carry out parallel development of different components. For instance, we can have a branch that is focused on automation scripts. We can have a branch that is focused on configuration management. And we can have another branch that is focused on deployment processes. Now here, I want you to look at the DevOps concept. This is a video that we made before. And in case you don't exactly understand who is a DevOps engineer or what DevOps is, you can go to the link that is going to be in the description section of this video, and you can be able to understand exactly who is a DevOps engineer and what a DevOps engineer does on day-to-day activities, and exactly what DevOps is as a methodology. We're going to continue with branching in Git. Release management is something that as a DevOps engineer, you have to be well conversant with. As a DevOps engineer, you are responsible for managing the release pipeline. Your pipeline can involve different components. And this also includes deploying the changes to different environments. And this is after the code has gone through the process of building and testing. If everything is successful, then you have to deploy the code to different environments such as development, testing, staging, and sometimes production. Branch facilitates the release management, and they do so by allowing you, of course, to create a release branches. And these release branches always have tags. And these tags are very important because they have the version. And this version allows you to specifically deploy the right version. For instance, if you are building infrastructure, we can say you are building infrastructure in AWS, you can have multiple versions of infrastructure code, and each of those versions can have a specific infrastructure that it deploys. So by creating a specific branch specific to that infrastructure code, you are able to control exactly what infrastructure you want to provision. Infrastructure as code is very important. DevOps practices is always going to be emphasized on automation. Automation means we are reducing the manual work. We want the tools to do the job for us. To be able to create infrastructure automatically, we need to understand how to define the infrastructure as code. And to do that, we need to be able to use tools like Terraform. And at the same time, we need to know how, of course, to use the version control system to be able to manage different versions of our infrastructure. Branches are instrumental in managing different versions of infrastructure code, as we said. Testing changes is also important because in all these different environments and different versions that you have, you can put them in different branches. And these different branches can help you to be able to know exactly what infrastructure should be provisioned to cater for a specific need in the company. Next is hot fixes and rollback. In case of critical issues, which are always going to happen, or bugs in the deployment, DevOps engineers, of course, you need to act quickly and solve the hot fixes. And you can do so with also being able to roll back to the previous version. So if you didn't know exactly how to create versions and tags using the Git branching concept, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to roll back to the previous versions. And we all covered how to create versions and tags in section 3 of this series of videos. The link to section 3 is also going to be included in the description section of this video that we have here. Branches also provide a mechanism to create isolated branches for hotfix, as we said, and this is going to allow you to have a resolution in case something happened in the production or in any environment without having to affect the productivity of other teams. We now look at the concept of collaboration with developers. DevOps engineers must collaborate. Your work is you have to work with others. As we said, a DevOps engineer is not somebody who is worried about the front end or the back end of the software. Your work is to make sure that the other people are working as effective as possible. Your work is to make sure that we don't have the roadblocks, is to make sure that we have a smooth way of working. The environment is automated. You have to ensure that we don't have what we call the bottlenecks. Your work is to support different teams, specifically the development team and the operation team. Efficiency is your #1 target. Of course, you also have to make sure that people are working and the productivity of the teams is not being affected by things that are very manual. Branches, of course, facilitate collaboration because they do allow DevOps engineers to be able to collaborate with developers and be able to work on infrastructure changes that are connected to the kind of features that developers are working on. Now we come to another concept here, and this concept is a continuous integration and testing. You have to remember that DevOps practices are heavily involved in continuous integration and automated testing. Feature branches are very important, and we saw this concept in section 3, where we say that feature branches, of course, allow us to be able to create branches that are specific to the features that we are working on. And this ensures that infrastructure modification do not introduce issues, because these issues can be tested in isolation before they can be merged to the quality code in the main branch. We now move to what we call auditability and compliance. DevOps often, of course, is going to involve compliance requirements and also auditing of changes. Branches are going to contribute to what we call a well-organized version control history, because remember what we said. We say that Git is very important because it helps us to track the changes that are happening in our environment, specifically for our code base. And that makes it very easy to be able to audit the changes to the infrastructure and also the deployment process over time. And this actually brings us to the end of section 4. Thank you. I'll see you in section 5.